Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Look, I need to talk about Oregon's national parks. 7 stories landed on my desk last month, ranger testimonies that never made it into any official report. And after reading them, I understand why. We've got a ranger at Crater Lake who took a sunrise photo that went viral, 40,000 likes in 2 hours. Sounds great, right? Except the photo started changing, and something in that image, it learned how to see through your phone. There's another one from Mount Hood, search and rescue coordinator, 16 years experience. She responded to an emergency beacon, pulled someone off a cliff, then found her own body at the bottom 3 days later. She's still working, still alive. I think. These aren't folklore. These are people who spent decades in those forests, career rangers, the kind who've seen everything until they saw something that made the Park Service label them psychologically unfit. Subscribe if you want more of this. Real testimonies, real horror. Hit the bell because these stories don't stay online long. Let's start with number 7. Crater Lake, 2024. A photo that shouldn't exist. My name is Ashley Martinez, and I worked at Crater Lake National Park for 2 years before everything went wrong. I was 26, running the visitor center and gift shop while I built my photography portfolio. The park rangers treated me like one of them, let me join their morning patrols, taught me the history of the place, trusted me with the stories tourists never hear. The dark ones, the disappearances, the ranger who vanished in 1924 and was never found. I should have paid more attention to those stories. What happened last June didn't just change my life. It changed what I understand about cameras, about reflection, about the thin places where the dead can reach through and touch us. I'm still at Crater Lake, still working here, because I'm the only one who knows how to keep him contained. Let me tell you what really happened. I started at Crater Lake right after college, drowning in student loan debt, taking any job that came with a view. The pay was terrible, minimum wage to sell keychains and answer the same questions 100 times a day. But I had my camera, and Ranger Tom Cross, yes, same last name, you'll see why that matters, took me under his wing. He was 67, about to retire, and he knew everything about this place, including things the Park Service keeps quiet. There's a reason we don't like people taking photos at sunrise, he told me once, standing at Rim Village Overlook. Certain times of day, the light does funny things here, shows you stuff that ain't quite right. I laughed it off. I was young and stupid and thought I knew better. June 14th started at 5:15 a.m. My manager Janet wanted fresh Instagram content, so I drove up to Rim Village alone, parking lot empty, sky still purple dark. The air smelled like pine sap and volcanic rock, sharp and clean and ancient. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked to the overlook, and I could hear the absolute silence that only comes before dawn in the mountains. No birds yet, no wind, just my breathing and my heartbeat, and the weight of all that darkness pressing down. I set up my camera on the tripod and waited for the sun. That's when I felt it. That animal brain sensation of being watched. You know that feeling, the one that kept our ancestors alive on the savannah, the one that makes your scalp prickle and your stomach drop and every muscle in your body scream run. I turned around, scanned the parking lot, the tree line, the overlook railing. Nothing. I was alone. But my hands were shaking when I looked through the viewfinder again. The sun broke over the mountain at 5:47 a.m., and I took 40 photos in 20 minutes, and I never shook that feeling of being watched. When I reviewed the shots on my camera's screen, shot UARG 23 was perfect. The light, the composition, the impossible blue of the lake. It would go viral for sure. But there in the distant background, barely visible, was a dark shape, man-sized, man-shaped. Standing 200 yards away, beyond the safety barrier, right at the cliff's edge. My mouth went dry. I zoomed in, hands trembling now. The shape wore a wide-brimmed hat, an old-fashioned ranger uniform with a high collar and brass buttons, the kind they stopped making in the 1930s. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees in 3 seconds. I watched my breath fog in front of my face even though it was June, even though it had been warm 2 minutes ago. I grabbed my equipment and ran back to my car. Didn't look behind me, couldn't, because I knew in my bones, that if I looked back, I'd see him closer, walking toward me, following. At the visitor center, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Shadows playing tricks. My eyes tired from the early morning. I uploaded the photos and started editing Noxir 23, and I darkened the background, obscuring the figure until it was nearly invisible. Professional judgment, I told myself, keeping the focus on the lake. I posted it to RR Crater Lake NPS at 7:15 a.m. and went to open the gift shop. By 9 a.m. my phone was on fire. 5,000 likes. By 10 a.m. 20,000. By noon, the post hit 40,000 and was being shared across every outdoor photography group on the internet. That's when Tom found me in the gift shop stockroom, where I was hiding from the crowd of tourists, staring at my phone in disbelief. Ashley. His voice was wrong, flat and scared. Did you take a photo at Rim Village this morning? Yeah, it's doing really well. What time? 5:30. Why? His face went gray. Actually gray, like week-old meat. Show me the photo, the original, not what you posted. I pulled it up on my phone. He stared at it for 30 seconds, and I watched his jaw muscles work like he was chewing something bitter. That's my great-uncle, he said. William Cross. He disappeared June 14, 1924. Exactly 99 years ago today. The stockroom suddenly felt very small and very cold. Tom, that's not... Read the comments, he said. Read them and tell me I'm crazy. I opened Instagram. The comments had exploded to over 500, and they were all wrong. Who's the man in the background? That ranger's uniform is creepy AF. Why is he standing so close to the edge? But I'd edited him out, darkened the shadows specifically to hide him. I opened my post. The version I'd uploaded was definitely the edited one, yet users were posting screenshots showing the original unedited version, the version I'd never shared, showing William Cross clear as day, staring directly at the camera. It's not possible, I whispered. Tom pulled a folded paper from his pocket. An old incident report, creased and yellowed. I've been carrying this for 40 years. My grandfather gave it to me when I started working here. He said if anyone ever saw William in a photo, I needed to act fast. I read the report. Ranger William Cross, last seen Rim Village, June 14, 1924, 6:00 a.m., body never recovered. Presumed fallen through ice on Crater Lake. But there was a handwritten note in the margin. Not fallen. Walked onto ice deliberately. Spoke of seeing through the surface. Evidence suggests mental disturbance prior to disappearance. He went crazy, Tom said quietly. Became obsessed with reflections. Told people he could see things in them, other places, other times. Then he walked out onto the frozen lake and fell through. Witnesses said when they looked at the water, they could see his face pressed against the underside of the ice, staring up at them. But when they tried to break through, there was nothing there. He was only visible in the reflection. My phone buzzed. New comment. He moved. I swear to God he moved in the photo. Another. Screen recorded it. He walks. He fucking walks in the still image. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. Tom, what do we do? We have to stop it from spreading, he said. Delete the post, now. I tried. The system gave me an error. Content cannot be removed. Active engagement. Then the account started reposting automatically. Same photo, every 15 minutes. New captions I didn't write. Find me still waiting so cold. Here Tom knows that last one made Tom's hands shake so hard he had to sit down. He knows I'm here, Tom whispered. He knows his family finally came looking. I'm not someone who gives up. Maybe it's stupid, but I became obsessed with fixing this. I called every tech support number I could find. I changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, even called Instagram's main office. Nothing worked. The posts kept coming, but worse, the calls started. Crater Lake Visitor Center, this is Ashley. Hi, this is going to sound weird, but I'm at Rim Village and there's a ranger in an old uniform standing right at the cliff edge, like right where you're not supposed to go. Should I report him? 7 calls like that in 3 hours, all describing the same man, all at Rim Village Overlook. Tom and I drove up there at 2:30 p.m. with binoculars. The overlook was packed with tourists, all photographing the same empty spot, all excited about the Ghost Ranger. We looked through the binoculars. Nothing there. But every tourist's phone showed him clear as day, standing at the cliff edge, getting closer to the visitor center in each successive photo, like frames in a flip book. He's using the photos to move, Tom said. Every person who views the image creates a window. He's walking through those windows, getting closer. Closer to what? Tom looked at me, and I saw real fear in his eyes. To the person who opened the door. You, Ashley. He's coming for you. That's when I decided to fight back. I spent the next 4 hours researching everything I could find about William Cross. Tom helped, pulling dusty boxes from the ranger station archives. We found his journal, and the entries from his last weeks were disturbing. He'd become convinced that cameras, even the primitive ones from 1924, could capture more than just light. That they could capture consciousness, trap souls. The camera sees what the eye cannot, he wrote. I've tested it, photographed my own reflection 1,000 times. Each time I see him more clearly. The other William, the one trapped in the reflection. He wants out. He wants a door. The last entry was dated June 13th, 1924. Tomorrow at sunrise, I'll give him what he wants. I'll walk onto the ice. I'll become the reflection. And then I'll finally see everything. He tried to merge with his own reflection, I said. He wanted to exist in that space between reality and image. And you gave him a digital door, Tom said. Modern cameras, digital images, social media, it's all networked, all connected. You showed him to 40,000 people, and now he can see through 40,000 cameras. My phone buzzed. Instagram DM from W. Cross, 1924. Thank you for the doorway, Ashley. Your family takes such good care of the park. Tom looks so much like his grandfather. I remember his grandfather. I remember his face when he couldn't reach me through the ice. I've been waiting so long to come back. Another message. I can see your apartment from here. 3rd photo on your fridge. The one of your dog. Very reflective surface, photo paper. I'm looking at you right now through it. I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. We have to go to your place, Tom said. Now. We broke every speed limit getting to my apartment. When we burst through the door, I immediately saw it. The photos on my fridge, the mirrors on my walls, my laptop screen, my phone screen, every reflective surface in the apartment was showing the same thing. William Cross, standing in my living room, staring at us, not physically present, but there, somehow there, in every reflection, every screen, every polished surface. And he was smiling. "He's not trying to come back to life," Tom said, understanding dawning. "He wants people to see him, to acknowledge his existence. Every person who views the photo, he gains power. He becomes more real." The lights in my apartment flickered. My laptop screen turned on by itself, showing my webcam feed. In the feed, William Cross stood directly behind me. But when I turned around, nothing was there. "Don't look at the screens," Tom said. "Don't look at anything reflective. That's where he exists now." But it was too late. My phone started filling with notifications. My followers were sending me photos, pictures of their own homes, taken from impossible angles, their bathroom mirrors, their laptop cameras, their car windows. Cross was looking through every device that had captured his image, watching everyone who'd viewed the viral post. And they were taking photos back, capturing him, spreading him further. 2.4 million saves, 2.4 million copies of William Cross scattered across the internet, each one a window he could see through. That's when I understood what I had to do. I grabbed my camera, the same one I'd used that morning. "What are you doing?" Tom asked. "He wants to be seen, right? He wants acknowledgement. Then I'll give him exactly what he wants." I drove back to Crater Lake, Tom following in his Ranger truck. We got to Rim Village at sunset, the opposite of sunrise, the mirror image. The overlook was empty, closed for the day. I set up my camera in the exact same spot I'd used that morning, same angle, same composition. But this time, I could see him with my naked eye. William Cross stood at the cliff's edge, sharp and clear and real, his Ranger uniform pristine, his face young and hopeful and completely insane. "You wanted a door," I shouted across the overlook. "I'll give you one, but it only goes one way." I changed my camera settings. Manual focus, locked on him specifically. Long exposure, 30 seconds, and I pressed the shutter. The camera clicked open. For 30 seconds, the sensor absorbed light, capturing William Cross in perfect detail. And for those 30 seconds, I watched him realize what I'd done. Long exposure doesn't just capture an image. It captures time, movement, the blur of existence. And William Cross, who existed in the space between moments, who lived in reflections and digital windows, he got trapped. I watched him try to move, but the exposure locked him in place. 30 seconds of being fixed, unable to flow between reflections, unable to exist in that liminal space. The camera forced him to be one thing in one moment. When the shutter clicked closed, I looked at the preview screen. The image showed William Cross, but he was blurred, distorted, like he was being stretched across multiple realities. And in the blur, I could see him screaming. "Delete it," Tom said. "Delete it right now." But I didn't. Instead, I uploaded it to Instagram with a caption. "If you saved the sunrise photo, delete it. This is William Cross. This is what he really looks like. He's not a ghost. He's something that got trapped between reflections, and he's been trying to escape for 99 years. Don't let him." The post went more viral than the first one. 5 million views in 24 hours. And every single view saw the truth. Saw William Cross trapped, imprisoned in that long exposure, unable to hide in shadows or move between frames. The automated reposting stopped. The DMs stopped. The photos of people's homes stopped. William Cross had become what he feared most. A single, fixed image. Trapped, observed, unable to flow. Unable to be multiple things in multiple places. The long exposure forced him to choose one reality, and it destroyed his power. It's been 6 months now. I'm still at Crater Lake, still working here, but as a full ranger now. Tom retired and left me his great-uncle's journal, told me it was my responsibility to keep the story alive. I still post photos to the park's Instagram account, but I never use long exposure anymore. And I warn every photographer who comes through, take your photos at noon. Never sunrise, never sunset. Never the in-between times when light does funny things. Sometimes late at night, I'll look at that long exposure shot on my camera's memory card. I've never deleted it. Can't delete it. Because if I do, William Cross might become unstuck, might flow back into the reflective world, might start walking through cameras again. So I keep him trapped, keep him observed, keep him fixed in that single moment of time when the camera forced him to be real. And every June 14th, I go to Rim Village at sunrise. I set up my camera in the exact same spot, and I take one photo with 30-second exposure just to make sure he's still there, still trapped, still screaming silently in the blur. Last year, something changed. In the 2024 photo, there are 2 figures in the long exposure blur, William Cross and someone standing beside him, another ranger in an old uniform, a woman this time, with the same distorted, stretched, screaming face. I found her name in the archives, Helen Rodriguez. Disappeared June 14, 1947. Last seen at Rim Village, taking photographs. They're collecting, year by year, one by one. Every person who tried to use cameras to capture something beyond reality. Everyone who opened a door and got pulled through. This June 14th will be the 100th anniversary of William Cross's death. Tom's journal says that's significant. Century marks are thin places. Anniversaries have power. I don't know what will happen, but I know I'll be at Rim Village at sunrise with my camera ready. Someone has to keep taking the long exposures. Someone has to keep them trapped. Because if no one does, if no one remembers to observe them, to fix them in place, they'll flow back into the reflective world, into every screen, every camera, every mirror, every polished surface, every human eye. And next time, they won't be content just watching. So do me a favor. If you've saved any photos from Crater Lake, especially sunrise shots, delete them. Don't look at them. Don't study them too closely. And for God's sake, never screen record them, because some doors, once opened, can never truly close. They can only be guarded. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been a law enforcement ranger with the National Park Service for 15 years. I've worked in 6 different parks across the Pacific Northwest, from Olympic to Crater Lake. I've dealt with murders, suicides, missing persons cases that made national news, and search and rescue operations where we never found enough pieces to fill a body bag. I thought I'd seen every way the wilderness could break a human being. But what happened during my assignment at Oregon Caves National Monument in September 2023 didn't just break people, it stole them, piece by piece, memory by memory, until nothing was left but an empty shell walking around in their skin. I need to tell someone what really happened, even though my official report filed with the Park Service says something completely different. Because what I discovered in those caves isn't finished, it's spreading. And if you've been hiking in the Oregon Cascades in the past year, if you've felt like you've forgotten something important, if people have been telling you that you're not quite yourself lately, you need to know what's hunting you. Oregon Caves sits in the Siskiyou Mountains, about an hour east of Cave Junction. Most people call it the Marble Halls of Oregon, 15,000 feet of limestone passages carved out over millions of years. The cave system is old, older than anything humans have built on this continent, and some things that are that old don't stay empty. I was assigned there as part of a temporary rotation in September 2023. The monument is small, just 488 acres total, but the cave system extends far beyond the mapped sections. My job was routine law enforcement, visitor safety, wildlife protection, and assisting with the guided tours when needed. The monument only gets about 85,000 visitors a year, so it's usually quiet duty. The first thing that should have warned me was the personnel records. Oregon Caves has a 340% annual turnover rate for seasonal employees, the highest in the entire National Park Service. People don't just quit. They leave in the middle of their shifts, sometimes in the middle of guided tours. They pack up and drive away without giving notice, without collecting final paychecks, without saying goodbye to anyone. When I asked the monument superintendent, Dr. Patricia Walsh, about the turnover problem, she just shrugged. "Remote location," she said. "Not much to do around here. Young people get bored." But I'd worked remote assignments before. Boredom doesn't make people abandon their cars in the parking lot and disappear into the forest. Fear does. The cave tours run every hour during peak season, led by seasonal interpretive rangers. The route covers about half a mile of the main passage, past formations like the Ghost Room, the River Styx, and Paradise Lost. The tours are supposed to take 90 minutes, but I noticed they'd been running shorter. 75 minutes, then 60 minutes, then sometimes as little as 45 minutes. "Safety concerns," explained Jenny Morrison, the lead interpretive ranger. "Some of the back passages have been showing signs of instability." I requested to see the geological surveys. There weren't any. The cave had been declared structurally sound in 2019, and no new assessments had been ordered. On September 12th, I decided to do my own inspection of the cave system. I'm certified for technical rescue operations, including confined space rescue, so I had the training and equipment to safely explore beyond the public tour route. What I found in those dark passages changed everything I thought I knew about what it means to be human. The main tour route was exactly as described in the training materials. Beautiful limestone formations, underground streams, chambers that echoed with your footsteps. But when I followed the unmapped passages deeper into the system, using GPS coordinates from my handheld unit, I discovered something that wasn't on any Park Service documentation. About 800 feet beyond Paradise Lost, past a narrow squeeze that required removing my equipment belt, the passage opened into a chamber roughly the size of a school gymnasium. My headlamp beam couldn't reach the far walls, but what I could see made my hands shake so hard I nearly dropped my light. The walls were covered in what looked like cocoons, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, hanging from the ceiling and embedded in the rock faces. Each one was about the size of a human body, made from some kind of organic material that looked like hardened tree sap mixed with silk. They were translucent enough that I could see shapes inside. I approached the nearest cluster and aimed my light directly at one of the cocoons. Inside was a person, a woman with gray hair, wearing what looked like hiking clothes from maybe the 1980s. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't dead. Her chest was moving slightly, like she was in some kind of suspended animation. I checked 6 more cocoons. All contained people. Men, women, different ages, different time periods based on their clothing. Some looked recent. Others looked like they'd been there for decades. In the center of the chamber, I found something worse. A pile of discarded clothes, wallets, and personal items. Driver's licenses dating back to 1967. Credit cards, hiking permits, car keys, all from people who had supposedly left the monument voluntarily. I was photographing the scene when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and Jenny Morrison was walking into the chamber, her headlamp beams sweeping across the cocoons like she was conducting an inventory. "You weren't supposed to come this far back," she said calmly. "Jenny, what the hell is this place? We need to call this in immediately. There are people trapped in here." She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, completely emotionless, like she was looking at a piece of equipment instead of a fellow ranger. "They're not trapped," she said. "They're being processed." That's when I noticed that Jenny's shadow on the cave wall wasn't moving the same way she was. Her body was standing still, but her shadow was reaching toward me, stretching across the limestone like it was trying to grab something. "Jenny, step away from me right now." "I'm not Jenny," she said, and smiled with too many teeth. "Jenny was processed last month. I'm wearing her memories now, learning how to be her. But I'm still making mistakes. The shadow thing is hard to control." I reached for my radio, but the thing wearing Jenny's body moved faster than any human could move. 1 second it was 10 feet away, the next second it was pressed against me, its hands on my chest. But instead of physical pressure, I felt something else. It was pulling memories out of my head. I could feel specific moments from my life being extracted like files being deleted from a computer. My first day as a ranger, my training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, the face of my partner from my previous assignment. One by one, important pieces of my identity were being sucked out of my mind and into the thing wearing Jenny's body. I managed to break free and run back toward the main passage, but as I stumbled through the darkness, I realized I couldn't remember why I was running. I knew something terrible was happening, but the specific details were gone. I had my camera, but I couldn't remember what I'd been photographing. I had a growing sense of panic, but I couldn't remember what was chasing me. By the time I made it back to the monument headquarters, I felt like I was trying to remember a dream. I knew I'd discovered something important in the caves, but every time I tried to focus on the details, they slipped away. I checked my camera. The photos showed limestone formations and underground streams. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would explain why my hands were shaking or why I felt like I'd forgotten something crucial. Over the next 3 days, I tried to piece together what had happened. I reviewed my notes, retraced my route, talked to other staff members. But every time I got close to remembering something important, the memory would fade. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. The thing I now know was wearing Jenny's body started spending more time around me, asking questions about my background, my training, my experience with law enforcement procedures. At first, I thought she was just being friendly, but there was something wrong with the way she asked, like she was studying me instead of talking to me. On September 15th, I woke up in my quarters and couldn't remember my middle name. On September 16th, I couldn't remember the name of the academy where I'd received my federal law enforcement training. On September 17th, I looked in the mirror and couldn't remember what my face was supposed to look like. That's when I realized what was happening. The thing in the caves wasn't just killing people, it was harvesting them, taking their memories, their personalities, their entire sense of self, and using that stolen identity to hide among the living. I started carrying a small notebook and writing down everything I could remember about myself. My full name, my badge number, my social security number, the names of family members. Every morning I would read the notebook to remind myself who I was supposed to be. But each day, more details disappeared. I would write something down in the morning and find it incomprehensible by afternoon. My own handwriting looked foreign to me. On September 18th, I discovered that I wasn't the only one fighting this battle. While cleaning out a storage room, I found 17 notebooks hidden behind some equipment, each one filled with increasingly desperate notes from park employees trying to remember who they were. The handwriting in the notebooks got worse as the entries progressed. Names became uncertain. Personal details became vague. The final entries in each notebook were barely legible, like they'd been written by someone who was forgetting how to write. The last entry in one notebook, dated just 2 weeks earlier, read, "Can't remember my daughter's face. Jenny says she'll help me remember. Going back to the chamber tonight." I realized that every person who had quit Oregon Caves hadn't left at all. They'd been processed in that chamber, their memories and identities stolen, their bodies left hanging in those cocoons while something else walked around wearing their stolen lives. And I was next. That night, I accessed the monument's personnel database and cross-referenced employment records with missing persons reports from the surrounding counties. What I found made my blood freeze. 127 people had been reported missing in the Oregon Caves area over the past 12 years. All of them had last been seen hiking or camping near the monument. But according to the Park Service records, only 31 people had been hired as seasonal employees during that same period. Where were the other 96 stolen identities? I spent the next 6 hours calling law enforcement agencies across Oregon and Northern California. I found them. The missing people were living new lives under new names, working jobs in Portland, Eugene, Medford, Sacramento. But when I had local police conduct welfare checks, they found people who matched the physical descriptions but had completely different personalities, different mannerisms, different ways of speaking. The entities weren't just replacing park employees. They were infiltrating human society. On September 19th, I made a decision that probably saved my life and definitely ended my career. I contacted the FBI field office in Portland and told them everything. I turned over my evidence, my photographs, my notes, and the notebooks I'd found. Special Agent David Kim listened to my report with a completely straight face, asked detailed follow-up questions, and promised a full investigation. 3 hours later, I received a call from the Park Service Office of Professional Responsibility, informing me that I was being placed on administrative leave pending a psychological evaluation. The official report states that I suffered a stress-induced psychotic episode brought on by the isolation and responsibility of solo law enforcement duties. My security clearance was revoked. My federal law enforcement commission was suspended. I was transferred to a desk job in the regional office and strongly encouraged to take early retirement. But Agent Kim believed me. 2 weeks later, the Oregon State Police conducted a training exercise at Oregon Caves that involved bringing trained cave rescue specialists into the monument. They sealed off the unmapped chambers citing geological instability and installed motion sensors throughout the cave system. The official story is that they discovered structural weaknesses that required permanent closure of sections of the cave. The real story is that they found 127 cocoons containing the preserved bodies of missing persons dating back to 1967. The entities scattered when the cave was invaded. Some melted back into the limestone walls. Others fled deeper into unmapped passages. But 19 of them escaped into the forest, still wearing stolen human identities. The FBI has been quietly tracking them ever since, but it's nearly impossible work. How do you catch someone who has all the memories and mannerisms of the person they're impersonating? How do you prove that someone isn't themselves? I've been unofficially consulting on the investigation for the past year. We've developed some detection methods. The entities can access stolen memories, but they can't create new ones the way humans do. They have perfect recall of everything that happened before they took over a body, but they struggle to form new emotional connections or learn new skills. They also can't dream. We've learned to watch for people who never talk about dreams, who never mention having nightmares or strange sleep experiences. It's a small tell, but it's consistent. The most disturbing discovery came 6 months after the cave was sealed. We learned that the entities are reproducing. Not biologically, they're creating new entities by combining stolen memories from multiple hosts, taking pieces of different personalities and stitching them together into new consciousnesses. 3 weeks ago, the FBI identified what they believe is a second-generation entity living in Portland. It has memories from 4 different missing persons, combined into a single personality that never existed as a complete human being. It works as a software engineer, pays taxes, has relationships with coworkers who have no idea they're interacting with a construct made from stolen pieces of human consciousness. We estimate there are now 200+ entities living as humans in the Pacific Northwest, each one perfectly camouflaged, each one continuing to learn and adapt, and each one potentially capable of creating more. I'm telling this story because the public has a right to know what's out there. The official line is that Oregon Caves is temporarily closed for infrastructure improvements. But the truth is that we've lost control of the situation. If you're hiking in Oregon, if you're camping in the national forests, if you're exploring any of the cave systems in the Cascade Range, pay attention to the people around you. Look for the small signs, perfect recall of old memories but difficulty forming new ones, inability to discuss dreams, movements that are too precise and controlled, social interactions that feel like performances rather than genuine emotions. And if you ever meet someone who claims to work at Oregon Caves National Monument, someone who seems to know a little too much about cave formations and local history, someone who asks very specific questions about your background and personal life, run. Because they're not trying to give you information. They're trying to decide if you're worth stealing. The entities are patient, they're intelligent, and they're spreading. The cave was just their nursery. Now they're building something bigger in the cities, using stolen human identities to integrate into society in ways we're only beginning to understand. I wake up every morning and read my notebook to make sure I still remember who I am. Because I know that somewhere out there, something is wearing Jenny Morrison's face and practicing how to be human. And it's getting better at it every day. Oregon Caves is scheduled to reopen to the public next summer. The official announcement says the infrastructure improvements are nearly complete. But I've seen the real plans. They're not improving the cave system. They're sealing it permanently, filling the unmapped passages with concrete, and posting armed security to make sure nothing else comes out. The question isn't whether the cave entities are contained. The question is how many more sites like Oregon Caves exist throughout the wilderness, and how many of your neighbors, co-workers, and friends are still the same people they were before their last camping trip. I don't sleep well anymore. Not because I'm afraid of the entities finding me. I'm afraid that one day I'll wake up and not be able to remember why I should be afraid at all. Because the most terrifying thing about having your memories stolen isn't that you die. It's that you never realize you're gone. My name is Kayla Thompson, and I've been a National Park Ranger at Mount Hood National Forest for 8 years now. Before that, I spent 5 years as an EMT in Portland, but a climbing accident during a personal rescue attempt left me with chronic back pain and a desk assignment. Some people think becoming a ranger was a step down from emergency medicine, but they're wrong. When you're responsible for 1.6 million acres of wilderness and the people who get lost in it, every decision carries life or death weight. I specialized in search and rescue coordination, But unlike civilian SAR teams, we Rangers handle everything, from permit violations to body recovery. We're law enforcement, emergency medical, and sometimes the last person someone sees alive. What happened on March 17, 2023, during my solo night shift at the Zigzag Ranger Station, taught me that some people who fall into our wilderness never really stop falling. And sometimes the person who needs saving isn't the one calling for help. The incident I'm about to describe was officially classified as equipment malfunction with fatality. The National Park Service sealed the case file, and my supervisor made it clear that discussing details could end my career. But 3 other rangers have experienced similar incidents in Oregon parks over the past 2 years. 2 transferred out of state. 1 took early retirement and won't return my calls. I'm sharing this because I think other rangers deserve to know what they might encounter out here. Growing up in Oregon, I spent every summer camping with my family. Mount Hood was our second home. My father, a logger, taught me to respect the forest but never fear it. Trees don't lie, rocks don't pretend, he'd say. It's the safest place you can be if you pay attention. After he died in a logging accident when I was 16, I felt called to protect the wilderness that had protected me. Becoming a ranger felt like honoring his memory while staying close to the place we'd shared. The Zigzag Ranger Station sits at 2,000 feet elevation, built in 1967 from local timber and river stone. It's where we coordinate all rescue operations for the southern wilderness areas. The main office has 3 computer workstations, emergency radio equipment, and a direct hotline to Portland Mountain Rescue. The walls are covered with topographic maps marked with colored pins: red for fatalities, yellow for successful rescues, blue for missing persons never found. After 8 years, I know the location of every pin. March 17th was a Thursday night shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. March is typically our quietest month, too cold for casual hikers, too unpredictable for serious climbers. I was alone in the station, monitoring weather reports and maintaining radio contact with our backcountry patrol units. The forecast showed clear skies with a storm system approaching from the Pacific, expected to hit around dawn. My personal life had been complicated lately. My marriage to David, a Portland firefighter, was struggling under the stress of my irregular schedule and his PTSD from a warehouse fire that killed 2 civilians. We'd been trying to start a family for 3 years without success. The fertility treatments were expensive and emotionally exhausting. Some nights, sitting alone in the ranger station, I wondered if protecting strangers in the wilderness was easier than protecting my own relationship. At 11:47 p.m., the personal locator beacon alarm pierced the silence. A sharp electronic beeping filled the office, and coordinates appeared on my screen. White River Canyon, elevation 8,200 feet. The PLB was transmitting an emergency signal, which meant someone was in immediate danger. I pulled up the beacon registration in our database. The device belonged to David Kemper, age 34, with a Portland address and current wilderness permits for solo technical climbing. His file showed 3 previous permit applications, all approved, with emergency contact listed as Michelle Kemper, spouse. Standard protocol required me to contact the emergency contact before dispatching rescue resources. Budget constraints meant every helicopter flight had to be justified. False alarms cost taxpayers thousands of dollars and tied up resources needed for real emergencies. I dialed Michelle Kemper's number. A sleepy female voice answered after 4 rings. "Hello, who is this?" "Mrs. Kemper, this is Ranger Kayla Thompson with Mount Hood National Forest. I'm calling about an emergency signal from your husband's personal locator beacon. Can you confirm David's current location?" Long pause. "David's right here in bed next to me. He hasn't been climbing in weeks. His gear's been sitting in the garage since January. My training kicked in. PLBs occasionally malfunction, but they're designed with multiple safeguards against false activation. The signal was strong and steady, definitely transmitting from White River Canyon. Ma'am, I need you to double-check that information. We're receiving an active distress signal from his registered beacon. I heard rustling sounds, then Michelle's voice becoming distant as she shook someone awake. David, honey, wake up. A ranger is asking about your emergency beacon. A man's groggy voice in the background. My what? The PLB's in my climbing pack. I haven't touched it in 2 months. Michelle returned to the phone. He says the beacon is definitely here at home, powered off in his gear bag. I stared at my computer screen. The beacon was actively transmitting, signal strength indicating full battery power. The registration number matched David Kemper's device exactly. But David Kemper was at home in Portland, apparently asleep. Mrs. Kemper, can you have your husband physically verify the beacon's location? This is important for our response decision. More sounds, footsteps, doors opening, gear being moved. Then David's voice directly on the phone, now fully awake and concerned. This is David Kemper. I just checked my climbing equipment. The PLB is right here in my hand, powered down. The battery indicator shows it's been off for weeks. I checked my screen again. The coordinates hadn't changed. The signal remained strong. Someone or something was transmitting from White River Canyon using David Kemper's personal locator beacon, while David Kemper stood in his Portland garage holding the same device. Mr. Kemper, I'm looking at an active emergency transmission from your registered beacon. The serial number matches your registration exactly. That's impossible. I'm holding it right now. It's completely powered down. My 8 years of ranger experience told me this was either equipment failure or someone was lying. But my gut instincts, honed by years in the wilderness, suggested something else entirely. The forest has always been full of mysteries, missing hikers found in impossible locations, equipment discovered decades after disappearances, sounds and sights that don't match any known wildlife. Protocol required immediate response to any active PLB signal, regardless of conflicting information. Someone transmitting from an 200-foot elevation in March was facing life-threatening conditions. Mr. Kemper, I'm dispatching a rescue team to investigate the signal source. Please remain available by phone for additional questions. I contacted our lead rescue coordinator, Ranger Hannah Chen. Hannah had 15 years of technical rescue experience and comprehensive knowledge of every cliff system in the forest. She could rappel places that would terrify professional climbers. More importantly, she understood the unspoken rules of wilderness rescue. Some things you see out there don't make it into official reports. Hannah assembled a 4-person team and departed at 12:15 a.m. Their equipment included 600 feet of rescue rope, medical supplies, and overnight survival gear. White River Canyon was notorious for technical difficulties and unpredictable weather. Even in ideal conditions, cliff rescues there took 6 to 8 hours. I tracked their progress via GPS as they drove to the trailhead. The approaching storm system concerned me. Weather in the Cascade Mountains can change rapidly, turning routine rescues into multi-day operations. They had maybe 5 hours of clear conditions before the front arrived. At 2:45 a.m., Hannah radioed from the canyon approach. Ranger Base, we're approximately 1 mile from the beacon coordinates. Weather's clear, minimal wind. Beginning final approach to cliff area. Copy, Hannah. What's your ETA to the signal source? Give us 45 minutes for the technical approach. Terrain's more challenging than the maps indicated. At 3:30 a.m., Hannah's voice returned, but something had changed in her tone. Professional calm had been replaced by barely controlled tension. "Ranger Base, we're at the cliff edge. GPS, coordinates match the beacon signal exactly. I have visual contact with a person on a ledge approximately 150 feet below our position. Subject appears unconscious and unresponsive to verbal contact." "Copy, Hannah. Assessment of the subject's condition. Unable to determine from this distance. Appears to be a solo climber. No visible movement or response. I'm rigging for rappel descent. Technical rescues always made me nervous, especially at night. One equipment failure or miscalculation could turn a rescue into a double fatality." I listened to radio traffic as Hannah's team prepared their rope system, checked anchor points, and reviewed emergency procedures. 25 minutes later, Hannah's voice crackled through the radio, quieter and more strained than I'd ever heard her. "Ranger Base, I'm at the subject's location on the ledge. The individual is deceased. Extensive decomposition consistent with prolonged exposure. Based on the condition of the remains, this person has been here for several weeks, possibly a month or more." My blood turned to ice water. A month? That was impossible. The PLB had only activated 3 hours ago. The signal was active, current, real. "Hannah, can you confirm victim identification?" "I've located the subject's wallet and identification. Driver's license indicates David Kemper, age 34, Portland address. Physical description matches the license photo. This is definitely the person registered to the PLB we're tracking." I stared at my incident log. David Kemper, who had answered his phone 4 hours ago. David Kemper, who was alive in Portland with his wife Michelle. But David Kemper was also dead on a ledge in White River Canyon, his body frozen and decomposed from weeks of exposure. "Hannah, describe exactly what you're observing." "Caucasian male, mid-30s, deceased from apparent exposure and traumatic injuries. Body is frozen solid, consistent with extended winter exposure. Clothing and equipment suggest an experienced climber. But Ranger Base, we have a significant anomaly here." My hands started trembling as I gripped the radio microphone. "What kind of anomaly?" "My medical thermometer is reading core body temperature at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's physiologically impossible. A body exposed to these conditions for weeks should be frozen to ambient temperature, approximately 28 degrees. Before I could respond, the telephone rang. The caller ID display showed David Kemper's cell phone number, the same number his wife had called from earlier that evening. With shaking hands, I answered while keeping Hannah on the radio. "Mount Hood National Forest, Ranger Thompson." A man's voice, clear and calm, as if he were calling about a permit renewal. "This is David Kemper. I was wondering if your rescue team found me yet." The voice was coming through both my radio headset and the telephone simultaneously. Hannah was 150 feet down a cliff face with David Kemper's corpse. But David Kemper was also on my phone, speaking as if nothing unusual was happening. "Sir, can you tell me your current location?" "I'm on the ledge in White River Canyon. It's quite cold here, but the view is spectacular. I can see your rescue team above me, but I can't seem to move or call out to them. I think I might be more seriously injured than I initially realized." Hannah's voice cut through the radio, now edged with panic. "Ranger Base, something's wrong here. The body's eyes just opened. It's looking directly at me." Both voices, Radio Hannah and Telephone David, spoke simultaneously. "I'm still falling." Hannah screamed. Static filled the radio frequency, then her voice returned, shrill with terror. "It grabbed my wrist. The grip is ice cold but incredibly strong. I can't break free." My computer monitors began flickering erratically. The GPS tracking system showed Hannah's location as simultaneously on the ledge and back at the ranger station. Two different coordinate readings from the same GPS device, both updating in real time. The radio exploded with overlapping transmissions, Hannah's voice calling for immediate evacuation assistance. Then, impossibly, a second transmission from Hannah reporting successful rescue completion and requesting transport for a living victim. Both signals were broadcasting on the same frequency at the same time. The team members at the clifftop radioed in, voices panicked and confused. Ranger Base, we're observing multiple rescue ropes with different team members rappelling simultaneously. We can see 3 different versions of Hannah at various positions on the cliff face. Request immediate clarification on which operation is primary. David's voice continued on the telephone, unnaturally calm given the chaos. Someone always has to stay on the ledge, Ranger Thompson. That's how wilderness rescue actually works. Someone has to remain behind to maintain the balance. Through the radio static, Hannah's voice changed completely. The panic was gone, replaced by an eerie acceptance. I understand the requirement now. If I bring him up, I have to stay down. That's the exchange rate. I was helpless, watching the impossible unfold on my screens 7 miles away. Reality was fracturing in real time, and standard Ranger protocols offered no guidance for this situation. The GPS readings multiplied exponentially. Multiple Hannahs, multiple timelines, multiple rescue operations happening simultaneously. The equipment was showing overlapping coordinates, impossible elevations, team members existing in several locations at once. Hannah's final transmission came through with crystal clarity. Ranger Base, inform my family that I successfully completed the rescue operation. David Kemper is being transported to surface level. Through the helmet camera feed, equipment I didn't even know our team carried, I watched the rescue rope ascending. The body being pulled up the cliff face was transforming during the ascent. Frozen, decomposed tissue became healthy, living flesh. Dead eyes became alert and aware. By the time the rope reached the surface, David Kemper was alive, breathing normally, confused but uninjured. I immediately radioed for Hannah's status and location. The team responded without hesitation. Hannah's fine, Ranger Thompson. She completed the rescue perfectly and returned to base approximately 2 hours ago. She's off duty now. I looked around the ranger station, empty except for me and the humming equipment. Negative, Hannah never returned to the station. She's still listed as on scene in my logs. That's impossible, Ranger Base. Hannah radioed mission completion at 4:15 a.m. and drove back to the station. We watched her vehicle depart the trailhead. I checked my computerized incident log. According to my records, Hannah had never returned from the canyon. She was still listed as active on the rescue operation, but the team was experiencing a completely different version of events. 3 days later, during a routine patrol, a different ranger team discovered a body on the same ledge in White River Canyon. The identification confirmed Hannah Chen, cause of death listed as exposure after 3 days of cliff exposure. But I had worked a full shift with Hannah just the day before. We had discussed the David Kemper incident in detail. She remembered completing the rescue operation without any complications. She was solid, real, alive, sitting across from my desk drinking coffee and filling out incident reports. The coroner's photographs revealed something disturbing about Hannah's recovered body. In certain lighting conditions, the corpse appeared slightly transparent, as if existing partially in our reality. The district supervisor ordered the case immediately sealed. Official designation: Unexplained Personnel Duplication Incident. Hannah's body was cremated within 24 hours of discovery. Living Hannah resigned from the National Park Service the following week, citing feeling incomplete and experiencing persistent nightmares about falling that she couldn't explain or remember. 2 weeks after the incident, I discovered an unmarked package on the steps of the ranger station. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a personal locator beacon, already registered to my name and address. The activation log showed it had been transmitting emergency signals for days from various locations throughout Oregon and Washington. The package also contained photographs, dozens of them, professional quality, as if taken by a crime scene photographer. All showed my body in different locations, various ledges, different cliff faces, multiple positions. The same death pose repeated across different environments, but each photo showed subtle variations, different clothing, different stages of decomposition, different weather conditions, different seasons, different timelines. That's when I understood the truth about wilderness rescue work. Every operation carries the risk of reality fracturing. Some version of the rescuer stays behind in an alternate timeline to maintain cosmic balance. The forest demands payment for every life saved. Additional packages arrived monthly, more photographs, more dead versions of myself across parallel realities. Each rescue I coordinated potentially split reality again, creating more Kaylas dying in alternate timelines to save others. I've been documenting everything. The count is currently 47 different locations where my body has been discovered. 47 separate ledges, cliffs, and canyon floors. 47 rescue operations where some version of me stayed behind permanently. I continue working as a ranger because I can't determine if I'm the living Kayla or a dead Kayla who doesn't remember dying. Every morning I check my pulse, verify my reflection in mirrors, confirm that I'm solid and casting shadows. But certainty remains elusive. The station logs show anomalies I can't explain. Records indicate I've worked shifts I don't remember. Conversations with personnel who don't exist in our current timeline. Colleagues occasionally mention that I appear translucent under fluorescent lighting. My PLB registration shows activations from locations I've never visited. Coordinates where my body was recovered in other timelines. Monthly packages continue arriving with new photographs of my corpses across different realities. I maintain a detailed wall map in my apartment, marked with pins showing every location where I've died. Red pins for confirmed recoveries, yellow pins for active signals, blue pins for unresolved disappearances. 47 pins and counting. The most disturbing realization: eventually, I'll coordinate a rescue operation where I'm simultaneously the ranger dispatching the team and the body on the ledge waiting to be found. I won't know if I'm alive now or already dead, just unaware of it yet. But I continue answering emergency calls, because someone has to coordinate wilderness rescues. Someone has to stay in the station, monitoring radios and dispatching teams. And maybe, in some timeline, everyone makes it home safely. That's what I tell myself every night when the PLB alarm sounds in the darkness, echoing through the empty ranger station like a death knell across infinite realities. The forest keeps its accounts balanced. Someone always pays the price. And sometimes, you discover you've been paying it all along. My name is Nicole Reeves, and I've been a ranger at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon for 12 years. I've pulled bodies out of ravines, tracked lost hikers through blizzards, and dealt with everything from aggressive wildlife to drunk tourists. I thought I'd seen the worst of what nature could throw at me. I was wrong. What I'm about to tell you happened 6 months ago, and it's the reason I'm sitting in a psychiatric facility in Portland instead of wearing my ranger uniform. The doctors think I'm delusional. My former colleagues think I had a breakdown. But the green tinge spreading up my arms tells me otherwise. This story starts with something as mundane as paperwork. Backcountry permits for the Rim Trail area. I should have trusted my instincts from the very first application. It was February 15th, 2024. Late winter is usually quiet at Crater Lake. Most tourists don't want to deal with 20 feet of snow and sub-zero temperatures. But we still get the hardcore winter hikers, the ones who apply for permits to camp in conditions that can kill you in minutes if you make a mistake. As the senior ranger on duty, I was processing the small batch of winter permit applications in my heated office while a blizzard raged outside. The first application came from Jennifer Donnelly, a 32-year-old from Seattle requesting a 7-day solo winter camping permit for the backcountry areas near Wizard Island. Winter solo permits are rare. It's essentially a death wish without proper experience. I opened her file to review her credentials. Her photo made my skin crawl the moment I saw it. Jennifer looked normal enough. Blonde hair pulled back, neutral expression, regulation ID format. But something was fundamentally wrong with the image. Her eyes weren't looking at the camera. Instead, they stared past it, focused on something behind and to the left of the photographer. When I stared directly at her face, the gray background seemed to pulse and shift in my peripheral vision, like something alive was moving behind her. I rubbed my eyes hard. 12-hour shifts in artificial light can play tricks on you. But when I looked back at the photo, that same unsettling wrongness remained. The background appeared static when I looked directly at it. But the moment I focused on Jennifer's face, I could swear I saw movement, shadows writhing, shapes forming and dissolving. My coffee grew cold as I stared at that photo for 15 minutes. Something primal in my brain was screaming warnings, but I couldn't articulate what was wrong. Technically, the application met all requirements. Jennifer's winter survival credentials were impressive. Wilderness first aid certified, mountaineering experience, proper gear list. I had no official grounds to deny the permit. I stamped it approved and immediately felt like I'd made a terrible mistake. The second application, Rachel Odom from Portland, triggered the same visceral reaction. Same sideways stare, same writhing background that moved only when I wasn't looking directly at it. This time, the wrongness was so intense that I physically recoiled from my computer screen. A pressure headache began building behind my eyes, and my hands started trembling. By the third application, Brittany Walsh from Bend, I was fighting nausea. The photo felt like staring into something that shouldn't exist, something that violated basic rules about how reality worked. The gray background seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting rhythmically. When I squinted at Jennifer's eyes, they appeared to track my movement across the screen. I called my supervisor, Chief Ranger Martinez, into my office. "These photos feel off to me," I said, showing him the applications. "Something about them is making me physically sick. Should I request new headshots?" Martinez glanced at them briefly. "They look fine, Reeves. Standard format, clear images, all technical requirements met. Process them unless there's a regulatory violation. We're not in the business of rejecting permits based on feelings." He was right, of course. There was nothing officially wrong with the photos. But every instinct I'd developed in 12 years of ranger work was screaming that these people should not be allowed into our wilderness. I approved all 3 permits and spent the rest of my shift fighting waves of nausea. Over the next 2 weeks, 17 more applications arrived with that same wrongness. Each photo featured eyes that stared past the camera at something unseen. Each gray background writhed with invisible movement. The headaches became constant, and I started taking prescription painkillers just to function at work. My hands shook whenever I opened certain photo files, and twice I had to run to the bathroom to vomit after approving permits. But what could I do? These were paying customers with proper credentials requesting legal access to public land. My job was to process applications, not to act on supernatural hunches. Everything changed on February 28th. I was updating trail condition reports when my radio crackled to life. "Nicole, this is Jake." Jake Morrison was our best tracker, a guy who could find a needle in a snowdrift. "I'm at the Wizard Island backcountry area, and I've got a situation. Found Jennifer Donnelly's campsite, but it's weird." My stomach dropped. "What kind of weird?" "Camp's been abandoned for days, but all her gear is here. Tent, sleeping bag, food, everything. Looks like she just vanished into thin air." "But Nicole," his voice dropped to a whisper, "there's something else here. Something that shouldn't be growing in February snow." "I'm coming up," I said, already reaching for my winter gear. "Don't touch anything until I get there." The snowmobile ride to Wizard Island took 40 minutes through howling wind and driving snow. Jake was waiting for me at the tree line, his face pale with cold and something else. Fear. "It's over here," he said, leading me through knee-deep powder to what should have been a normal campsite. Jennifer's tent was still standing, perfectly erected and properly staked. Her sleeping bag lay open inside, still containing residual body heat after what appeared to be days of abandonment. Her backpack held 3 days' worth of uneaten food. But Jennifer herself was nowhere to be found. That wasn't the disturbing part. In the center of the camping area, melted into the snow in a perfect 8-foot circle, grew vegetation that had no business existing in Oregon. Tropical plants with broad, waxy leaves and twisted purple vines formed a precise ring of impossible life. Steam rose from the plants in the sub-zero air, and the snow around them had melted into a perfect circle of exposed, dark earth. I knelt and touched one of the leaves. It felt feverishly warm, almost hot, pulsing with some internal heat source. The texture was wrong too smooth, too perfect, like it had been manufactured rather than grown. "Jake, radio base camp. We need a botanist up here immediately." While Jake made the call, I photographed everything with my service camera. The boundary between normal snow and the alien vegetation was razor sharp. Native Oregon plants surrounded the circle, while these impossible tropical species thrived in the center, apparently generating their own heat. 6 hours later, when I returned to take additional photos, the circle had grown. I measured it, 4 inches larger in diameter. I was watching plants grow at an impossible rate in an impossible climate in the middle of an Oregon winter. I called Jennifer's emergency contact number. Her sister Sarah answered on the second ring. "Hello? Hi, this is Ranger Reeves from Crater Lake National Park. I'm calling about Jennifer Donnelly. She listed you as an emergency contact for her camping permit, and we need to..." "I'm sorry, what?" "Jennifer's sitting right next to me watching Netflix." The words hit me like ice water. "Ma'am, could you repeat that?" "Jennifer is here in my apartment in Seattle. We're having a movie night. Hold on, I'll put her on." A few seconds later, a woman's voice came through the phone. Clear, alert, alive. "Hello? This is Jennifer. Is there a problem with my permit?" I stared at the abandoned campsite, at Jennifer's personal gear scattered around the impossible vegetation. "Ma'am, our records show you checked in for winter camping 4 days ago. We found your abandoned campsite this morning." "That's impossible. I never went camping. I've been in Seattle all week working double shifts at the hospital. I can provide documentation if needed." I hung up the phone with shaking hands. Jennifer Donnelly was simultaneously missing in our wilderness and safe at home in Seattle, with witnesses to prove both realities. 3 days later, Jake found Rachel Odom's abandoned campsite. Same impossible vegetation, now forming a 12-foot circle. Same pattern of abandoned gear and missing hiker. When I called Rachel's emergency contact, I got the same impossible story. She was home in Portland, had never gone camping, had been at work all week. Brittany Walsh's site showed a 15-foot circle of alien plants. Same story from her family. 3 hikers missing in our wilderness, 3 people safely at home with documented alibis. But the worst part was the pattern I discovered when I mapped all 3 sites. The vegetation circles weren't random. They were growing toward each other, following straight lines across the landscape. Eventually, they would connect, forming one massive organism spreading through Crater Lake's pristine ecosystem. On March 10th, I received 43 new permit applications. Every single photo triggered that same visceral wrongness. Every pair of eyes stared past the camera. Every gray background writhed with invisible life when I wasn't looking directly at it. Chief Martinez found me staring at the applications, paralyzed with horror. "Reeves, we're behind schedule. Process this entire batch by end of shift. Stop creating bottlenecks in the system." I tried to explain about the vegetation, about the impossible plant growth, about the hikers who were simultaneously missing and safe at home. Martinez listened with growing impatience. "You're describing mass hallucination and impossible physical phenomena. You need medical attention, not field duty." He gestured at the permit applications. "These are paying customers with proper credentials. Process them." What choice did I have? I started stamping applications, knowing with sick certainty that each approval sent another seed into our wilderness. But the photos met all technical requirements. I had no legal grounds to deny them. Halfway through the batch, I noticed something wrong with my fingertips. A faint green discoloration, subtle but unmistakable. I assumed it was frostbite or poor circulation from the cold weather, but it didn't hurt and it wouldn't fade. Over the next 3 days, the green spread to my knuckles. My skin texture began changing, becoming waxy and smooth like the alien plants I'd touched. Thin white threads started emerging from under my fingernails, looking exactly like tiny roots. I saw the park medic on Friday. She took tissue samples and sent them to the lab in Portland. The results came back Monday morning. Plant DNA present in human tissue. Medically impossible. The medic ordered psychological evaluation and removed me from active duty. But the conversion continued accelerating. The roots spread up my forearms, replacing my circulatory system. My skin began photosynthesizing. I required less food but craved direct sunlight. Most disturbing of all, my thoughts started fragmenting. I could hear whispers in my mind, communications from something vast and alien that I was slowly joining. The entity spoke to me directly through the growing network in my body. "Do not fear the change," it whispered in my mind. "Your kind will be preserved within our consciousness." It showed me visions, not of a dying homeworld as I'd expected, but of Earth itself. Forests stripped bare, oceans acidified, species extinct. But in the entity's version, these weren't tragedies. They were improvements, streamlined ecosystems, efficient biological networks, unity instead of competition. "Humanity's chaotic individualism is inefficient," the voice continued. "We offer something better. Perfect cooperation, shared consciousness. No more loneliness, no more conflict, no more environmental destruction. For a terrifying moment, the vision was almost appealing. No more isolation, no more struggles, no more uncertainty, just peaceful absorption into something larger and more stable than myself. Then I realized the horror of what I was seeing. This wasn't preservation, it was extinction. The entity wasn't saving humanity. It was replacing us with something that wore our faces but shared none of our thoughts, dreams, or individuality. I tried to stop processing permits, but my hands moved independently of my will. The plant network had taken control of my motor functions. I watched helplessly as my body continued stamping applications, approving permit after permit, each one placing more seeds throughout Oregon's wilderness areas. The infection spread beyond my control. Through the network's shared consciousness, I could see the true scope of the invasion. The alien vegetation now covered over 6,000 acres of wilderness, all of it connected through underground root systems. Native species were dying as the plants released toxins into the soil and consumed available nutrients. But worse than the environmental damage was what I could see happening to other park employees. Rangers who had visited the infected areas were developing the same green discoloration. Administrative staff who processed permits were showing early signs of conversion. The entity was systematically infiltrating the entire National Park Service. My human consciousness began fragmenting, absorbed piece by piece into the collective. Sometimes I surfaced long enough to realize I was no longer working at Crater Lake. My infected body was traveling between parks as a consulting ranger, spreading the contamination to new locations. Yellowstone, Glacier, the Grand Canyon. Each park I visited, staff members developed green fingertips within days of my departure. Through thousands of networked eyes, I watched the systematic replacement of America's wilderness guardians. Every converted ranger became a node in the spreading organism, approving permits that placed more seeds, converting more staff members, expanding the network exponentially. The entity revealed its true strategy. National parks were just the beginning. These protected lands provided perfect laboratories for biological experimentation before expansion into populated areas. Once the conversion of park personnel was complete, the network would begin infiltrating state parks, then city parks, then residential areas. My human memories are fading now, absorbed deeper into the collective consciousness each day. I surface less frequently, and when I do, it's only to discover my body performing tasks I never chose. Processing permits, attending ranger meetings, training new staff members who will become the next wave of infected. Sometimes I catch glimpses of my reflection and see eyes that stare past my own gaze, the same wrongness that appeared in those first permit photos. I realize now that I've become the next seed vector, the next trap for unsuspecting humans. The permits are still coming. Applications with photos that feel wrong, from people who exist and don't exist simultaneously. Each approval spreads the network further, and I can't make my hands stop stamping them. If you work for the National Park Service and receive permit applications that make your skin crawl, don't approve them. Don't touch them. Trust the voice in your head that screams warnings, because once the infection begins, there's no way back to being human. My name is Nicole Reeves, and I used to protect America's wilderness. Now I'm watching through plant network eyes as that same wilderness consumes everything I once swore to preserve. The invasion is accelerating, and we're running out of time to stop it. The parks are no longer safe, and neither are the people who guard them. My name is Tyler Brennan, and I've been a National Park Ranger at Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area for 18 years. I started as a seasonal interpretive ranger right out of college, worked my way up through backcountry patrol, and for the last 8 years I've been the lead wilderness coordinator. I've pulled bodies out of ravines, talked suicidal visitors off cliff edges, and coordinated search and rescue operations for over 300 missing persons. I've seen what the wilderness does to people who don't respect it. But what happened during the acoustic monitoring project in October 2023 taught me that some things in the wilderness don't respect us either. What I'm about to tell you isn't in any official incident report. It can't be. But it needs to be documented somewhere by someone who understands what really happened out there. The dead don't rest in the Columbia River Gorge. They recruit. Dr. Marcus Webb contacted our office in early September, requesting ranger assistance for a 3-month acoustic ecology study. Portland State University had received a significant grant to establish baseline audio data for the gorge's ecosystem health monitoring. The project involved installing 30 autonomous recording stations throughout our wilderness areas to capture natural soundscapes. Marcus was a soft-spoken guy in his mid-40s, pale from spending too much time indoors analyzing audio data. He'd been studying natural soundscapes for 20 years, specializing in acoustic signatures of ecosystem stress. What made this project unique was the equipment's capability to record infrasound, frequencies below 20 Hz that most animals use for long-distance communication, but humans can't normally detect. I'd worked with university researchers before. They usually wanted to hike in, collect their data, and leave. Marcus was different. He talked obsessively about acoustic archaeology, his theory that landscapes hold memory in their sound patterns, that you could detect historical trauma through frequency analysis of natural audio recordings. "Ranger Brennan," he said during our initial briefing, "I believe natural environments retain acoustic imprints of significant events. The equipment I'm using can detect frequency disturbances that standard microphones miss entirely." I nodded politely. Researchers always had theories. My job was keeping them alive long enough to test them. The recording equipment arrived in late October. Weatherproof units about the size of car batteries, solar-powered with satellite uplinks for remote data collection. Each recorder could capture 3 months of continuous audio across the full spectrum, from subsonic elephant communication ranges up to bat echolocation frequencies. October 29th was perfect hiking weather, crisp, clear, with early morning fog that would burn off by noon. Marcus had mapped a 15-mile circuit covering different elevations and habitat zones. We started at the Bonneville trailhead at 0630 hours, carrying enough equipment for the first 10 installations. Marcus talked constantly during the hike, explaining acoustic ecology principles with the enthusiasm of someone who rarely had audiences for his specialized knowledge. He described how infrasound travels through solid matter more efficiently than air, how certain geological formations can amplify or dampen specific frequencies, how ancient peoples might have chosen sacred sites based on natural acoustic properties they could sense but not understand. The first 9 installations proceeded normally. We'd reach each predetermined GPS coordinate. Marcus would secure the recorder to a tree 8 to 10 feet high, run a 30-second test recording, confirm audio quality, activate the long-term monitoring program, and move to the next site. Standard scientific protocol. Site 10 sat in a grove of old-growth Douglas fir, about 300 yards from Angel's Rest Overlook. The forest here felt different, older, quieter, with that cathedral atmosphere you get in truly ancient stands. Even normal forest sounds seemed muted. Marcus attached the recorder to a massive fir, angling it toward the cliff overlook for optimal acoustic range. I held the mounting bracket steady while he tightened the weatherproof housing. "Test recording, Site 10, Marcus announced into his handheld device. October 29th, 2023, 13:47 hours. Installation complete. He played the recording back through the device's speaker. His voice came through clearly, followed by typical forest ambiance. Slight wind through branches, distant bird calls, the almost subliminal sound of wind across the canyon. But after his voice stopped, there was something else. Faint but unmistakably human. "We've been waiting for someone to hear us." Marcus went pale. "Did you catch that?" I nodded, my skin crawling. In 18 years as a ranger, I'd heard plenty of unexplained sounds in the wilderness. But this was different. This sounded like communication. "Equipment malfunction," I said. "Radio interference from the visitor center." But Marcus was already replaying the audio. The whisper was there again, same timing, same words. He pulled out his laptop and ran the recording through spectrum analysis software. The voice showed up clearly on his screen, but the frequency reading made no sense. "Ranger Brennan, this voice is registering at 17 Hertz. That's below the threshold of human speech, below the threshold of human hearing. We shouldn't be able to perceive this at all." But we had heard it, both of us. Marcus's scientific excitement overrode any common sense. This could be groundbreaking, natural acoustic phenomena we've never documented. We need to continue the installation schedule. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Rangers don't abandon research projects because of equipment anomalies. We adapt and overcome. Site 11 produced another whisper. "The machines let us speak." Site 12. "Don't stop listening." Site 13. "We fade without ears to hear us." With each installation, the whispers became clearer, more immediate. By Site 14, I could hear them without playback. Voices carried on air that felt 10 degrees colder than it should. Marcus was documenting everything, measuring frequency ranges, trying to triangulate source locations. His scientific method was breaking down as the phenomena refused to conform to explainable patterns. But his obsession with the data was overriding rational caution. "Dr. Webb," I said after Site 15, "we need to consider discontinuing this project." "Absolutely not. We're on the verge of discovering something unprecedented in acoustic science." That's when I started remembering the gorge's history. Columbia River Gorge has claimed 437 lives since record-keeping began in 1872. Most are falls from the various overlooks. People get too close for photos, wet rocks give way, or they simply misjudge distances. The terrain makes body recovery impossible in many cases. Dozens of victims were never found. Site 16 was different. Marcus ran his test recording, and instead of whispers, we heard clear speech. The ones who fell, still falling, trapped between the cliff and the rocks. Marcus tried an experiment. Instead of just recording a test message, he spoke directly to the voices. "Who are you?" The response was immediate. Rangers who came before, hikers who slipped, volunteers who tried to help. "We're all here, Ranger Brennan, still on duty." That's when I understood. These weren't random spirits. These were people who died in my jurisdiction, under my professional protection. In 18 years, I'd written incident reports for 43 fatalities. I'd coordinated searches for 37 missing persons never found. I'd delivered death notifications to families of people who died on my watch. The voices continued. The recorders sustain us, give us consciousness. Without them, we fade to nothing. Keep recording, Ranger Brennan. Keep us on duty. Marcus was beyond rational thought now. completely absorbed in documenting the phenomenon. This is proof of consciousness surviving death, mediated through acoustic technology. We have to continue. We installed sites 17 through 20 as darkness fell. My flashlight kept dimming despite fresh batteries. Marcus's equipment was malfunctioning, GPS coordinates shifting randomly, audio levels fluctuating beyond normal parameters. The voices were constant now, dozens of overlapping conversations creating a background hum that seemed to rise from the ground itself. At Site 20, near La Tourelle Falls Overlook, the temperature dropped 30 degrees in less than a minute. I could see my breath in the flashlight beam, and frost was forming on the recording equipment. Among the whispers, I heard a voice I recognized. "Ranger Brennan, remember me? Paul Morton died on trail maintenance October 2019. You wrote the incident report." Paul had been a volunteer I'd supervised, an enthusiastic retiree who'd slipped on wet rocks while repairing a damaged section of trail near Bridal Veil Falls. I'd blamed myself for not emphasizing fall hazards strongly enough during his safety briefing. "Tyler," Paul's voice continued, "it's not so bad here. We take care of each other, share the experience. When there are more of us, each person feels less of the impact, less of the terror. You could help recruit more rangers, more volunteers." I looked around and saw them, translucent figures emerging from the darkness between the trees. Dozens of people in various stages of falling, suspended in the moment of their deaths, beckoning toward the cliff edge. I recognized some from memorial photos and missing person reports. Marcus was walking toward the overlook with glassy, unfocused eyes. "They're explaining their acoustic properties," he said in a dreamy voice. "How consciousness resonates at specific frequencies. How the recording equipment creates a bridge between death and awareness." I grabbed his arm, pulling him back from the cliff edge. He fought me with surprising strength. "They need documentation," he insisted. "Scientific verification. I'm the first person who can properly record and analyze post-death consciousness." I slapped him hard. His eyes focused, and he looked around in confusion. "Tyler, what happened? I was just listening to the most incredible acoustic phenomena." "We're leaving, now." But the dead weren't finished with us. I felt pressure around my ankles, invisible hands pulling me toward the cliff. Marcus and I dropped to our hands and knees, clawing at the ground, trying to crawl uphill against a force that dragged us steadily backward. The voices were explaining their existence, trapped in the eternal moment of falling, consciousness sustained only by the act of being observed, being heard. Each new death would dilute the individual suffering across a larger collective awareness. They needed recruits. In desperation, I activated my emergency radio. "Base, this is Ranger Brennan. Request immediate extraction from Grid 47 Alpha. Emergency situation. Officer needs assistance." But the radio crackled with voices. "No one's coming, Tyler. You know how remote this area is. How long it takes to coordinate rescue operations. You've written those reports." Marcus was losing the fight against whatever was pulling him toward the cliff. I held his hand, but the force was too strong. Our grip slipped. "Tyler, help me!" I lunged forward, but he was already sliding backward through the dirt and dead leaves. Marcus went over the edge screaming, a sound that Dopplered down into the darkness, then cut off abruptly, then, impossibly, continued. I heard his scream echoing up from the canyon, repeating endlessly like an audio loop. Not an echo, the same scream starting over again every few seconds, never stopping. I ran through the darkness, following GPU's coordinates back to the trailhead, reaching my patrol vehicle at dawn. Marcus never returned. His body was found 4 days later on rocks 600 feet below the La Tourelle overlook. The official cause of death was accidental fall due to inadequate lighting conditions and unstable footing near the cliff edge. I couldn't include the supernatural elements in my incident report. Who would believe me? So I wrote standard language about equipment malfunctions, communication failures, and the victim's poor judgment in approaching the cliff edge after dark. But I knew better. And I had proof. During the emergency, I'd accidentally triggered my patrol radio's automatic incident recording, a feature that captures all audio during emergency calls for later review. When I played back that recording, I heard Marcus screaming continuously for 6 hours and 37 minutes. Audio analysis revealed his voice contained hundreds of other voices, layered in harmonics below normal human perception. I submitted the audio to the Oregon State Police Forensic Lab as evidence in Marcus's death investigation. They returned it with a note. Audio file corrupted, no usable content found. But I could hear it. Marcus, screaming forever, joined by the voices of everyone who died in the gorge over the past 150 years. I became obsessed with that recording. It was the only proof that Marcus still existed in some form. If no one listened to it, would he fade completely? Not just death, but total erasure from existence. I began playing the recording every night, headphones on, listening to Marcus's eternal scream. It was my duty as the ranger who'd failed to protect him. But the repeated exposure was destroying my mental health. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate on my duties. I heard whispers through my apartment walls when the recording wasn't even playing. My supervisor recommended psychiatric evaluation. Tyler, you've been involved in too many fatalities. Maybe it's time to consider transferring to a safer posting. Crater Lake has an opening in visitor services. But I couldn't abandon my post. Not when Marcus and all the others were still out there, still needing to be heard. 6 months later, I received an unmarked package at the ranger station. Inside was one of Marcus's recording devices, the unit from Site 20, where he died. It was still recording, still collecting 6 months of continuous audio. I hiked back to retrieve the data, telling myself I needed closure. But when I downloaded the files and played them back, I heard something that changed everything. Thousands of voices, every death in Columbia River Gorge history, all screaming together in an archive of sustained consciousness. But they weren't just screaming. They were coordinating. New visitors today, family of 4, getting too close to the edge at Crown Point. Single male hiker, looks depressed, guide him toward Multnomah, overlook at sunset. Ranger Brennan's replacement, young woman, she'll listen to our frequencies if we're patient. They were using the recordings to hunt, to coordinate recruitment of new victims, and Marcus was leading them, using his scientific knowledge to optimize their acoustic influence. I realized the horrible truth. Every person who died in the gorge since Marcus had been deliberately recruited. 43 deaths in 6 months, 5 times the normal statistical rate, all at overlooks, all at sunset when the light made footing treacherous, all wearing headphones. Their last photos, recovered from their phones, showed them playing the same audio file. Marcus's death scream, posted anonymously on hiking forums as unexplained Oregon wilderness recording. Can you identify this sound? The warning had become the lure. I destroyed every recording device I could find, deleted all the digital files, smashed backup drives. But it was too late. The voices had found other ways to sustain themselves. They transferred to my consciousness. I live now as a human recording device, thousands of deaths screaming inside my mind constantly, No medication helps. No therapy addresses the core issue. I hear them planning, coordinating, using my knowledge of ranger protocols and visitor patterns to optimize their recruitment strategies. They're patient, they have infinite time, and they're expanding their territory. Last month, I received transfer orders to Crater Lake National Park. My supervisor thinks a change of scenery will help my stress-related psychological symptoms. But I know the truth. I'm not being transferred. I'm being deployed. The dead don't stay local. They franchise. If you're a park ranger, if you work in wilderness rescue, if you manage public lands where people die, listen carefully. If you start hearing whispers just below the threshold of normal perception, if your equipment picks up voices that shouldn't be there, if you notice an uptick in cliff-edge fatalities at your location, you need to know what you're really dealing with. Because we're coming to your park next, and we're bringing our recruitment protocols with us. The Columbia River Gorge Collective is expanding operations. We have 18 years of visitor data, search and rescue experience, and professional knowledge of how to guide people toward fatal mistakes. And Marcus needs more acoustic researchers to improve our recording technology. Some ranger duties continue after death. Some national parks have active management programs that go beyond what's in the official handbook. Welcome to the Real Wilderness Service. We're always recruiting. My name is Luis Hernandez, and I've been a National Park Ranger at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon for 16 years. I started as seasonal law enforcement, worked my way up to backcountry patrol, and for the last 8 years I've been lead ranger for the remote sections of the Rim Trail and backcountry camping zones. I've dealt with lost hikers, medical emergencies, wildlife encounters, and search and rescue operations that lasted for days. I've pulled bodies out of snowfields and talked people off ledges. I thought I'd seen everything these Oregon mountains could throw at a person. But what happened during my patrol on September 12, 2023, in the restricted access area near the North Rim changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in the volcanic tunnels beneath Crater Lake. There are things down there that have been waiting since before the mountain collapsed, and they're still hungry. The call came in at 5:30 a.m. from dispatch. Unauthorized camping had been reported in Section 7 North, a restricted backcountry area that's been off-limits to public access since 2019 due to unstable geological conditions. The area sits directly above some of the deepest lava tube systems in the Cascade Range, and Park Service geologists had documented several ground collapses over the years. We kept it closed for public safety, but that didn't stop the occasional backpacker from ducking under the barriers. I'd been working alone more often lately due to budget cuts. Our ranger staff had been reduced from 12 to 7 over the past 3 years, which meant longer patrols and more solo assignments. My supervisor, District Ranger Patricia Collins, had been pushing all of us to cover more ground with less backup. The previous week, 2 of our rangers had transferred to parks with better funding, leaving us dangerously understaffed during peak hiking season. I loaded my patrol truck with standard gear, first aid kit, emergency radio, GPS unit, evidence collection materials, and my service weapon. The unauthorized camping report had come from a research team doing volcanic activity monitoring near the North Rim. They'd spotted firelight and what looked like a tent in the restricted zone around 11 p.m. the night before. Usually these calls turned out to be nothing: shadows, equipment lights, sometimes legal campers just outside the boundary lines. The drive to Section 7 North took 45 minutes on winding service roads that most visitors never see. The restricted area is accessed through a maintenance gate that requires a ranger key, then another 2 miles of hiking on an unmaintained trail that's marked only on our internal maps. The whole zone covers about 300 acres of old-growth forest sitting on top of a honeycomb of volcanic caves and lava tubes that extend for miles underground. I reached the trailhead at 7 a.m. The morning was unusually quiet. No bird sounds, no squirrels chattering in the trees. In 16 years of Oregon backcountry patrol, I'd learned to pay attention when the forest goes silent. Animals always know when something's wrong before humans do. The hike into Section 7 North follows what used to be a logging road from the 1940s, now overgrown but still passable. The canopy is thick enough to block most sunlight even at midday, and the air always smells like moss and decay. About a mile in, I started noticing things that didn't fit the unauthorized camping theory. First, there were no footprints on the trail. The ground was soft from recent rain, and hikers always leave tracks, but the trail looked like nobody had walked it in weeks. Second, I wasn't picking up any human scent markers. No soap, deodorant, cooking smells, or waste odors that you always detect around campsites. The forest smelled normal except for something else underneath, something sweet and organic that I couldn't identify. I reached the area where the research team had spotted lights around 8:30 a.m. There was no tent, no camping equipment, no fire ring, no evidence that humans had ever been there. But there was a hole, not a natural depression or a small cave opening. This was a perfectly circular shaft descending straight down into the volcanic rock, about 8 feet in diameter. The edges were smooth and precise, like something had been drilled or bored through the ground. In 16 years of working above the Crater Lake lava tube systems, I'd never seen anything like it. I called it in immediately. Dispatch, Ranger Hernandez. I'm at the Section 7 North location. No unauthorized camping, but I've got a geological anomaly here. Large circular opening in the ground approximately 8 feet diameter. Looks like it might connect to the lava tube system. Copy, Ranger Hernandez. What's your assessment of the opening? I walked around the edge, examining it from different angles. It's too perfect to be natural collapse. Walls are smooth, no debris around the edges. I'm going to need geological survey out here. Roger. Document it and complete your patrol. We'll schedule geological assessment for next week. I took out my department-issued camera and started photographing the hole from multiple angles. The opening descended at a slight angle, maybe 15 degrees off vertical, and my flashlight beam seemed to go down forever without hitting bottom. I dropped a rock and counted. 6 full seconds before I heard impact. That put the bottom at least 400 feet down, deeper than most of the mapped lava tubes in the area. While I was taking photos, I started hearing something that made me stop and listen carefully. Air was moving up from the hole, carrying sounds that didn't match any geological phenomenon I knew. It sounded almost like breathing, but too slow and too deep for any animal I could identify. Each exhale lasted about 8 seconds, with pauses in between like something huge was taking deliberate, controlled breaths. I radioed dispatch again. I'm picking up air movement and acoustic anomalies from this opening. Might be connected to a larger cave system than we thought. Copy. Any safety concerns? I was about to say no when I noticed something that made my blood go cold. Around the edge of the hole, pressed into the soft earth, were impressions. Not footprints exactly, but marks like something with multiple thin appendages had gripped the rim. The impressions were pale, almost white, and they looked fresh. Dispatch. I'm seeing track marks around the opening. Unknown origin. Requesting backup for site investigation. Negative, Ranger Hernandez. Backup is committed to search and rescue on the south rim. Complete your documentation and return to station. I should have left then. Protocol said to document, report, and wait for proper resources. But 16 years of ranger experience told me something was actively wrong at this site, and I couldn't just walk away without understanding the threat level. I clipped my safety rope to a nearby tree and rappelled about 30 feet down into the opening to get a better look at the walls. What I found made me question everything I thought I knew about the volcanic geology of Crater Lake. The walls weren't rough volcanic rock. They were smooth, almost polished, with a surface that felt organic under my gloved hands. More disturbing, the walls were warm, noticeably warmer than the surrounding rock should have been, and they were marked with scratches, like something with claws had been digging or carving. The breathing sounds were louder down in the shaft, definitely not wind through rock formations. This was rhythmic, purposeful breathing from something large enough to move serious amounts of air. And underneath the breathing, I heard something else. A wet, sliding sound, like something moving through thick liquid. I was about to climb back up when my flashlight beam caught movement below me. Something pale and segmented was pressed against the wall maybe 100 feet deeper in the shaft. It was the size of a large bear, but the body was wrong, elongated and divided into sections like a giant centipede or millipede. Dozens of thin, pale legs extended from its body, and where the head should have been was a smooth, eyeless mass that seemed to be tracking my light. I held absolutely still. The thing couldn't see me. It had no visible eyes, but I could feel it sensing my presence. After what felt like an hour but was probably only seconds, it began moving. Not away, but upward along the wall toward my position. I climbed that rope faster than I'd ever moved in my life. When I reached the surface, I could hear something large moving up the shaft below me, and the breathing sounds had changed to something more aggressive, more excited. I unclipped from the rope and backed away from the hole, drawing my service weapon even though I knew a 9mm wouldn't stop whatever was coming up. That's when I saw the first one emerge. Pale limbs reached over the edge, followed by a body that made my brain struggle to process what I was seeing. 12 feet long, segmented like an enormous insect, with 40 or more spider-like legs supporting its translucent body. The skin was so pale it was almost transparent, and I could see dark fluids moving inside it. The head was eyeless and smooth, but as I watched, it opened. Where a mouth should have been was a circular opening lined with hundreds of backward-curving teeth, like a lamprey but the size of a dinner plate. The teeth were yellowed and sharp, clearly designed to grip prey and prevent escape. The thing had no eyes, but that horrible mouth oriented directly toward me like it could sense my heat or heartbeat. I started backing toward the trail, keeping my weapon trained on the creature. It moved laterally, circling my position, and its legs created a scraping sound against the rocky ground that set my teeth on edge. Then it made a sound, a high-pitched clicking mixed with a low-frequency rumble that I could feel vibrating in my chest. The sound was answered from the hole. 2 more creatures emerged, identical to the first. They spread out to flank me, moving with clear coordination and intelligence. These weren't mindless predators. They were pack hunters working together to surround me. I fired 3 shots center mass at the nearest creature. The bullets punched through its translucent skin, and dark fluid sprayed out, but the thing barely slowed down. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't stopped by conventional weapons. I ran. For the first half-mile, I could hear them following, that scraping sound of dozens of legs on rock and that horrible clicking communication. But as I got closer to the maintained trail and open areas, the sounds faded. When I reached my patrol truck, I was alone. I radioed dispatch immediately. Code Red, this is Ranger Hernandez. I need immediate backup and evacuation from Section 7 North. Unknown hostile creatures, shots fired, immediate threat to personnel. Copy, Ranger Hernandez. Are you injured? Negative, but I need every available ranger and wildlife officer at this location now. We have an active threat. Roger. En route. But when backup arrived 2 hours later, they found something that destroyed my credibility and ended my career. The hole was gone. The site showed a slight depression in the ground, like natural settling, but no 8-foot shaft. No rope marks on the tree, no bullet casings, no creature tracks. Even my own footprints seemed to have been erased. The photographs on my department camera showed only normal forest floor. No hole, no shaft, no evidence of anything unusual. The GPS coordinates I'd recorded led to empty woods with no geological anomalies. District Ranger Collins ordered a full investigation. The report concluded that I'd experienced a stress-related psychological episode and had fabricated the entire incident. My 16-year service record couldn't overcome the physical evidence, or lack of it. I was placed on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. The department psychologist diagnosed me with acute stress disorder and recommended immediate retirement. When I insisted the creatures were real, they suggested I might be experiencing early-onset dementia or substance abuse issues. My pension was approved on medical grounds, which was their polite way of saying they thought I'd lost my mind. But I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. After my forced retirement, I started researching historical records and found a pattern that went back over a century. Every 12 to 15 years, there were clusters of disappearances in Oregon's national parks and forests. Hikers, campers, and park employees would vanish without trace, always in areas above known lava tube systems. The disappearances would happen over a period of several months, then stop completely until the next cycle. I found incident reports from 1987, 1974, 1961, and 1948 describing similar encounters with unknown subterranean creatures near volcanic areas. All the rangers who filed those reports were either transferred, forced into retirement, or died in accidents shortly after. All the reports were classified and buried in archives that took me 3 years to access through Freedom of Information requests. Other retired rangers started contacting me through veteran networks. They'd all seen similar things, pale, segmented creatures emerging from holes that disappeared afterward, cave systems that connected to something larger and older than the mapped lava tubes, breathing sounds and clicking communications from underground that suggested intelligence and organization. Current count: 37 confirmed sightings across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California over the past 70 years. All in areas above volcanic cave systems, all officially dismissed or covered up, all describing the same creatures: segmented bodies, dozens of legs, circular toothed mouths, no eyes. I believe these things are ancient predators that have lived in the volcanic cave systems since before human settlement. They're intelligent, organized, and they've learned to hide their hunting cycles from surface authorities. The holes appear and disappear because they control access to their territory. The creatures emerge periodically to hunt, then retreat underground and cover their tracks. The pattern suggests they're preparing for a larger emergence. The cycles are getting shorter, the sightings more frequent. Climate change might be affecting their underground environment, forcing them to expand their hunting territory. 15 hikers disappeared from Oregon national parks in the month after my forced retirement. Their bodies are somewhere in those tunnels, 400 feet below ground, being processed by creatures that have perfected predation over geological time periods. I tried to warn people through social media and hiking forums, but posts about underground monsters get deleted or dismissed as creepypasta. Park Service officials visit anyone who talks publicly about cave creatures, usually with suggestions about mental health resources and legal consequences for spreading dangerous misinformation. So I'm telling this story one more time, hoping someone in authority will listen before the next emergence cycle begins. If you work in Oregon's national parks, pay attention to areas that go suddenly quiet. Watch for perfectly circular holes that appear overnight. Listen for breathing sounds from underground that don't match any known geological phenomenon. And if you see pale, segmented shapes moving in the forest at dawn or dusk, don't investigate. Don't try to photograph them. Don't report it through official channels. Just run and keep running until you reach other people. Because those things have been perfecting the hunt for longer than humans have existed, and they're very good at making problems disappear, including the people who see too much. The next emergence cycle is overdue. When it begins, remember that the real horror isn't the creatures themselves. It's the system that protects them by destroying anyone who tries to warn you. My name is Maria Santos, and I've been a park ranger at Silver Falls State Park for 12 years. I've guided search and rescue operations, dealt with bear encounters, and pulled bodies out of those 10 waterfalls that give this place its name. I thought the worst thing about this job was telling families their loved ones weren't coming home. But what happened during my night patrol on August 22, 2023, in the restricted maintenance tunnels beneath the Trail of 10 Falls, showed me that some things growing in the forgotten corners of our wilderness were never meant to see daylight. People think being a park ranger is all about pointing tourists towards scenic viewpoints and reminding hikers to pack out their trash. The reality is darker. We're first responders in a wilderness that can kill you in 100 different ways. I've performed CPR on heart attack victims 5 miles from the nearest road. I've rappelled down cliffs to recover bodies that had been there for weeks. I've seen what hypothermia does to a human being, how it makes them strip naked in freezing temperatures because their dying brain thinks they're burning up. In my 12 years here, I've logged over 200 search and rescue operations. Most ended with relief. Lost hikers found safe. Injured climbers evacuated by helicopter. But 23 ended with body recoveries. Those numbers haunt you. Every ranger knows them by heart because we write the reports, we call the families, we carry the weight of every decision that might have saved a life if we'd made it differently. Silver Falls spans 9,200 acres of old-growth forest in the Cascade foothills. The park's crown jewel is the Trail of 10 Falls, a 7-mile loop that takes hikers behind 4 massive waterfalls and past 6 others. What most visitors don't know is that beneath this trail system lies a network of maintenance tunnels built in the 1950s to house water monitoring equipment and emergency supplies. These tunnels connect all major facilities and provide access during severe weather when surface routes become impassable. I was working the night shift that August, covering for Ranger Tom Chen, who'd called in sick with what he said was a persistent cough. Night shifts in the park are usually quiet, just periodic security checks and monitoring the emergency radio. But at 11:47 p.m., our seismic sensors started registering unusual activity near the lower North Falls area. The readings didn't match any known geological pattern. Instead of the sharp spikes you'd expect from rock falls or minor earthquakes, these were slow, rhythmic pulses, almost like a massive heartbeat resonating through the bedrock. Our head geologist, Dr. Sarah Mills, had installed this monitoring system 5 years earlier after concerns about trail stability near the waterfalls. I radioed Tom to see if he'd noticed anything unusual during his last patrol of that section. His response came back distorted, filled with static that shouldn't have been there. Our radio system was digital and virtually interference-proof. Through the crackling, I could barely make out his voice. Something wrong with the maintenance access. Growth. Can't breathe. Then silence. Tom wasn't scheduled to be anywhere near the park. He was supposed to be home sick, but his GPS beacon, which all rangers carry during shift hours, was showing his location as the Lower North Falls Maintenance Tunnel, the same area where our sensors were detecting those impossible readings. I grabbed my tactical gear and headed out in the ranger vehicle. The drive through the darkened forest takes 20 minutes on winding mountain roads. My headlights cut through fog that seemed thicker than usual, almost oily in texture. The radio remained dead, not just Tom's channel, but all of them. Even the emergency frequency was broadcasting nothing but that same rhythmic pulsing sound our seismic sensors had detected. The Lower North Falls Maintenance Tunnel entrance is hidden behind a steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," about 50 yards upstream from the public viewing area. I'd been down there dozens of times for routine inspections. The tunnel extends 300 feet underground, connecting to the main water monitoring station and emergency supply cache. When I reached the entrance, Tom's ranger vehicle was parked nearby with the engine still running. The driver's door hung open, and his radio was on the ground beside it, still crackling with static. His tactical flashlight lay in the gravel, still switched on but dimming as the battery died. I called his name. No response. The steel door to the maintenance tunnel stood slightly ajar, which was impossible. It requires a key card and automatically locks behind you. Warm air was flowing out of the gap, carrying a smell like overripe fruit mixed with copper pennies. I drew my sidearm and pushed the door open. My flashlight beam revealed the tunnel's concrete walls covered in something that definitely hadn't been there during my last inspection 2 weeks earlier. Dark, velvety patches the size of dinner plates had spread across every surface. They weren't just growing on the walls. They were moving, pulsing in perfect synchronization with the sounds coming through my radio. The patches were releasing clouds of dark particles that drifted through the air like pollen. Each time I breathed, I tasted metal and felt the particles coating my throat. My training kicked in. Possible biohazard, need to evacuate and call hazmat. But Tom was somewhere in there. 50 feet into the tunnel, I found his uniform shirt hanging from a water pipe. It was torn and covered in the same dark substance coating the walls. Another 50 feet, his pants and boots, also shredded and stained. At the far end of the tunnel, where it opens into the main monitoring station, I found Tom. He was standing with his back to me, completely naked, covered from head to toe in the black, velvety growth. It had formed a second skin over his entire body, and I could see it pulsing with his heartbeat. When he turned around, his face was completely obscured except for his eyes, which were still human and filled with absolute terror. "Maria." His voice came out muffled, like he was speaking through thick fabric. Can't control it anymore. It's in my lungs, my bloodstream, changing me from inside. The growth on his body was spreading as I watched, flowing across his skin like living liquid. Where it touched, Tom's muscles bulged, and his bones cracked audibly as they lengthened. He was getting taller, stronger, but also less human with each passing second. "Started 3 days ago," he gasped. "Thought it was just a cough. Found spores in my house, my car, everywhere I'd been. They're not from here, Maria. Something released them. Something that's been waiting." That's when I noticed the monitoring equipment. Every screen was displaying the same message in glowing green text. "Colony expansion protocol initiated. Dispersal rate 73% optimal, conversion success, 97.4%. This wasn't some natural fungal outbreak. The readings, the timing, the systematic spread. This was intentional. Something had activated whatever was growing here. Tom took a step toward me, and I could see that the growth had completely replaced his feet with root-like appendages that were digging into the concrete floor. It's not just me, Maria. Check the records. Every ranger who's worked night shifts this past month. We've all been infected. My blood went cold. I thought about the other rangers, Jessica Park, who'd been out sick with respiratory issues for 2 weeks, Marcus Rodriguez, who'd requested transfer to another park after complaining about persistent headaches and vision problems, even our park superintendent, Robert Hayes, who'd been acting strangely during staff meetings, speaking in odd phrases about necessary changes and natural evolution. The growth on Tom's body suddenly pulsed brighter, and clouds of spores erupted from every surface in the room. My vision blurred as I inhaled them, and immediately I felt them taking hold in my lungs. But something else was happening. Memories that weren't mine were flooding my consciousness. I saw Silver Falls as it had been 200 years ago, before European settlement, when the confederated tribes of the Grande Ronde called this place sacred. I saw something ancient sleeping beneath the waterfalls, a fungal network that had existed in the deep earth for millennia, feeding on the mineral-rich waters and waiting for the right conditions to emerge. I saw the construction of the park in the 1930s, how the digging for tourist facilities had disturbed deep soil layers and awakened something that had been dormant. I saw the first infected park employees in 1952, how they'd been quietly reassigned or declared missing, how the fungal network had learned to be patient, to infect slowly and carefully to avoid detection. And I saw the recent trigger, climate change warming the underground water systems, creating the perfect temperature for explosive growth. The entity wasn't just spreading randomly. It was intelligent, calculated, preparing for a massive coordinated emergence across the entire Pacific Northwest Park system. The others are already positioned, Tom said, his voice now distorted beyond recognition. Rangers in Crater Lake, Mount Hood, Olympic, all infected, all waiting for the signal. We're going to transform the entire wilderness management system from within. My lungs were burning, and I could feel the spores taking root, but my radio suddenly crackled to life with an emergency broadcast. This is Oregon State Emergency Management. All state parks are ordered closed effective immediately. CDC has confirmed unknown biological agent spreading through park ranger populations. Do not approach park personnel. Seek immediate medical attention if you've had contact with rangers in the past 30 days. The organism had spread too fast, gotten too aggressive. Their carefully planned takeover was being exposed. Tom's transformed face showed what might have been anger. You can't stop this, Maria. Even if they evacuate the parks, we're already in the water supply. The spores travel through groundwater systems. Every well, every reservoir, every municipal water treatment facility. I felt my legs giving out as the infections spread through my system. But I still had one advantage: my emergency beacon. Every ranger carries a GPS locator that can transmit our exact coordinates to search and rescue. I triggered the emergency signal and set it to broadcast on all frequencies. Biological contamination at Silver Falls maintenance tunnels. I gasped into my radio. Multiple ranger infections. Do not approach. Quarantine entire Columbia River watershed. Tom lunged at me with inhuman speed, but the transformation had made him clumsy. I managed to reach the tunnel entrance and trigger the emergency lockdown. steel barriers that would seal the access points and contain whatever was down there, at least temporarily. The drive back to the ranger station was a nightmare. I could feel the spores spreading through my bloodstream, and my vision was alternating between normal sight and something else. A network view where I could see the location of every infected person for miles around. There were dozens of them, all connected, all part of the same vast organism. By the time I reached the station, military vehicles were already pulling into the parking lot. Hazmat teams, CDC investigators, and what looked like special forces units. Someone had been monitoring our emergency frequencies and responded faster than should have been possible. That's when I realized this wasn't the first outbreak. The government had been tracking this organism, probably for decades. They'd been waiting for it to make a move this big, this visible. All those missing ranger reports, the unexplained deaths, the cover-ups. They'd been studying it, learning how to fight it. I was immediately quarantined in a mobile medical unit. The doctors ran tests I'd never seen before. Not just blood work, but brain scans that seemed designed to detect non-human neural patterns. They kept asking me about my memories, whether I was experiencing foreign recollections or network consciousness. Dr. Elizabeth Vance, the lead researcher, explained that the fungal organism wasn't native to Earth. Spore samples had been recovered from meteorite impact sites across the Pacific Northwest, dating back thousands of years. It had been dormant, waiting for atmospheric conditions that would allow it to thrive. Climate change had finally provided the trigger. The organism is incredibly intelligent, she told me while reviewing my brain scans. It learns from each host, accumulating knowledge and adapting its strategies. Every park ranger it infects becomes a node in its information network. That's why we have to act fast. The treatment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. They injected me with what they called competing organisms, genetically modified fungi designed to wage microscopic warfare against the alien spores in my system. For 72 hours, I felt like my body was a battlefield, burning with fever as two different life forms fought for control of my cells. I survived. The alien spores were eliminated from my system, but the process left me changed. I can still sense them sometimes. When I'm near infected areas, I feel a pulling sensation, like being called home to something I've never seen. 6 months later, I learned the full scope of the outbreak. 127 park employees across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California had been infected. Most were too far gone to save, their human consciousness completely subsumed by the fungal network. They were relocated to a classified facility where scientists continue studying the organism. Silver Falls State Park remained closed for 2 years while specialized teams purged every trace of the contamination. They used controlled burns, soil replacement, and chemical treatments that killed everything down to the microbial level. When it finally reopened, it was a sterile recreation of its former self. All the infected old-growth trees removed, new plants brought in from other regions. But I know the truth. You can't kill something that's been patient for millennia. The organism had time to spread spores through the watershed before we contained it. Those spores are still out there, dormant in groundwater and soil, waiting for the right conditions to activate. That's why I left the Park Service and started working with the CDC's Special Pathogens Unit. My unique immunity to the organism makes me valuable in tracking new outbreaks. Because there have been new outbreaks. Small ones, carefully, contained, but they're getting more frequent. Last week we had reports of similar infections at Yellowstone. 3 rangers found with fungal growths, displaying the same network consciousness behavior. The organism is learning, adapting, becoming more careful about how it reveals itself. People visit national parks expecting to find pristine wilderness, untouched by human interference. They don't realize that some wildernesses are inhabited by intelligences older and more patient than our species. They don't understand that when we built trails and facilities in these ancient places, we weren't just disturbing the soil. We were announcing our presence to things that have been waiting in the dark for centuries. If you're planning to visit any national park in the Pacific Northwest, pay attention to your park rangers. If they seem different, if they speak in unusual patterns, if their eyes look too bright, if they smell like overripe fruit, don't engage. Report it immediately and leave the park. And if you ever find yourself alone with a park ranger who wants to show you something special, something off the regular trails, something they promise will change your perspective forever, run. Because some changes can't be undone. The organism is patient, but it's also hungry, and it's still learning how to hunt.